Hi guys, it's Kirsty. Today I want to do a video about some of the things that I wish I knew before my recovery journey. So some of the good stuff that I've learned along the way, which I would have preferred to have known a bit earlier, but you know, that's just the way it goes. But before I get into that, please do subscribe by clicking on the subscribe button below in order to stay up to date with all of the new videos as they're released. So I wanted to do this video because there was a few key standout things for me that I learned on my recovery journey through making kind of mistakes and through getting myself in deeper and struggling and then kind of learning the hard way with things. And if anybody can have their recovery slightly excelled by knowing a couple of these things, or if it can, you know, save them a week, a day, or even an hour of being more stuck or suffering, then all the better. So I'm going to go over some of the key things that I learned that were really useful for me, how they were useful and how they continue to be useful for me. So the first thing relates to uncertainty, which is a very important aspect of recovery. Not the only aspect, but a very important aspect. So the thing I learned about uncertainty that I wish I knew before is that when we are practicing accepting uncertainty, we're not accepting the odds being 50-50. So we're not necessarily saying this could be or could not be true. There's a 50-50 chance. What we're accepting is uncertainty of, you know, could be 1 in 100, could be 1 in 1,000, could be a 1 in a million chance. We're simply accepting uncertainty that there is a chance, as small as it might be, that our worst case scenario or feared outcome is true. It's not a 50-50 thing. And I think that's one of the things that we find hard when we're trying to accept uncertainty, is that we think that we're saying the likelihood of this being true is equal to the likelihood of it being not true and it being OCD. And that's not what we're saying. We're not necessarily putting numbers on it, you know, saying, oh, but this is, okay, so this is 99% going to be OCD and there's a 1% chance. We're not putting numbers on it specifically, but what I'm saying, it's not as simple as the flip of a coin. It was an article actually that I read that sort of explained this really well, and it did refer to, it's not a case of flipping a coin, it's heads, it's true, tails, it's not true. We live life as if it is OCD, accepting the small chance, however small it may be, that it might be true. So the next thing was that we make things worse for ourselves by adding on extra layers of unpleasant feelings, by upsetting ourselves about the unpleasant feelings that we're having. So for example, by this I mean that if we're doing well in our recovery for a while and we're feeling less anxious, but then we have a period that we're feeling anxious again for a week, we kind of end up digging ourselves deeper when we beat ourselves up over the fact that we feel anxious, because then we get depressed over the fact that we feel anxious. And then it could get even worse, because then we might start getting anxious about the fact that we feel depressed about feeling anxious. So we layer on emotions on top of other emotions, and we're actually making it worse for ourselves. So for example, if we're working on unconditional acceptance and we're struggling with this, by getting angry about that, we're getting angry about the fact that we can't accept the thing that's causing other negative emotions. So you're getting the more that you layer more unpleasant emotions on top of what you're already feeling, the further away from the core of the problem you're getting. And by that I mean, there's irrational beliefs fueling the fear that keeps OCD locked on. So that's the irrational beliefs causing fear, which, you know, anxiety, whatever. And then we're beating ourselves up and we're down about the fact that we have anxiety and we have these feelings. And then are we going to get even more wound up because we're feeling these things? So we're struggling to accept these things. So are we going to make it worse by feeling angry or depressed that we're struggling to accept. So here for me, it was at certain points in my journey, I was working on acceptance, but on some particularly hard days, I just had to face the fact that I just couldn't accept that day. It would just be like, defeat, okay, you know, you win the battle, but I'm still going to continue to win the war, type thing. So it's being able to accept, not accepting. Because if you can't, then you're just going to feel worse, and it's another layer of feeling crap on top of already feeling crap with OCD. So that was something that I discovered, was that some days I had to accept not accepting and not make myself feel even worse. The next thing is that when it comes to mental compulsions like rumination or like mental self-reassurance, it's obviously something we want to try to stop, or if we're unable to try and stop it because it almost feels automatic, want to try and reduce it. But the thing is, sometimes we will just have thoughts that feel like reassurance. For example, when you're suffering from relationship OCD, you might have, and you're having a better day, then you might have a thought, oh, it's definitely OCD because I just love that person to pieces today. And then you might suddenly think, oh, I just reassured myself. So here, what we have to remember is that we can't do recovery perfectly. And that's something that we could, you know, get quite stuck on if we're trying too much to do recovery perfectly. It is not the end of the world if you accidentally perform a mental compulsion. And the sooner we accept that, the better, because yes, we want to stop it, but you don't want to react with anxiety to thinking that you might have self-reassured, because then that's, as I said before, that's layering on another level, you know. Then you become scared of, you know, positive thoughts as well, and, you know, various things. So this is generally driven by a fear of fear. So it's driven by the desperation to recover from OCD, because it is unpleasant and we don't want to be anxious forever, and we're afraid of being anxious forever. So we're desperate to recover, and being so desperate to recover and not perform compulsions and mental compulsions and, you know, going overboard in recovery, it ends up being its own obsession. And that's something that got me stuck for a while. And I would be still having it, even though I felt quite confident that I had become a lot more rational about certain themes, I was still finding myself stuck on them. And the thing that was keeping me stuck was that I wasn't being rational about being stuck. So that is something that can keep you stuck for longer, because you're still trying to work out, well, what am I doing wrong in recovery? I have to get it right. And really, what you're doing wrong in recovery is that you're trying too hard and you're not accepting. You're doing the things that you need to do, which is good, but you're not accepting having OCD in the meantime. And the thing is, a big part of recovery process is letting time pass. It's doing the things that we need to do to recover, and not resisting, and living our lives and letting time pass. And it's not something that we necessarily want to do when you have OCD, because OCD, the cycle is fueled by acting immediately to eliminate discomfort in the moment. And that is something we want to get out of the habit of doing, to reach a point where we're more comfortable long term. The next thing that I learned was that it's okay to change as a person, and in fact it's quite necessary to change. You know, we've developed problems because of certain behaviours and certain beliefs and ways of thinking and behaving, and now it's time for us to do something about that. And OCD can keep you latched on because it you know, there's quite often a big focus on, you know, being authentic, but if you change, you might fundamentally change as a person, and then it might come true. Various things like that. So that sort of fear creeping in, which is almost like a backdoor spike, you know, say if you start to work on your beliefs and your anxiety starts to subside, or you start to become more confident, you start to be better at setting boundaries in your life in order to have the time and the energy to work on your recovery, because you want to prioritize that. you know, you might have thoughts about, you know, being selfish, or you might, you know, oh, if I, you know, behave this way and I'm not keeping these people happy all the time, I might lose them. And, you know, we're working changing our beliefs and realizing we don't need to have the people that, you know, we don't need the people that we're afraid of losing. We want them in our lives. We don't need them because we can still survive without them. But you might be afraid to start having these beliefs and, you know, living life a bit more the way you want to live it, by your rules, and in order to preserve your free time and energy to recover, because obviously, you know, you suffered a lot with OCD and you need to make time to recover, but it makes you less available in other, you know, sometimes maybe to do favors for people, which we still want to be able to do, but maybe you're going to do that a little bit less than you used to. And maybe as you're less afraid of making mistakes at work, you stay later a little bit less, because you realize that it doesn't matter if your colleagues think, you know, it doesn't matter what your colleagues think of you, you know, as long as you're working hard by your standards. But you feel like you're changing, and OCD can sometimes make you feel like that's a bad thing, that you shouldn't be selfish, or you shouldn't be, you know, putting yourself first. But why shouldn't you be? And this is something I definitely faced, is that I would do things I didn't always want to do because I was being a bit of a people pleaser, because I was frightened of losing people. It's definitely one of the fears fueling most of my themes. Actually, it's losing people from my life. They're important to me. And then I would get lots of threats thrown out at me by OCD that I'm being selfish and that people won't want to be my friend anymore, or I'm not as fun anymore because I'm, you know, treating myself better, or you know, spending more time working on recovery, or doing quieter, calming things that I want to do. So this is it's kind of almost like a fear of change, the fear like you might lose people or lose things or lose parts of yourself, and it's not being afraid to make those changes in order to make your life better for yourself. And then another thing is something that I've done another video on. It's that acceptance of a feared scenario doesn't mean the elimination of all negative emotions. So the reason we work on acceptance is to bring down the extreme negative emotions, so like extreme fear, you know, horror, depression, and to help us to be able to allow things to be there without resisting quite so much. But that doesn't mean that all negative emotions go away straight away. So I thought that when I was first starting working on acceptance, that I was aiming to be completely fine with the thoughts being there, and if I wasn't, then I'd be wrong. But actually, what you will go through before you're able to feel indifferent about the thoughts being there, you will go through a period of reducing your anxiety with them being there, and you might feel a bit low. They might make you feel low because the feared scenario that you're obsessing about is not how you want your life to go, really, ideally. So you're going to feel a bit crap about that. You know, that you're going to have emotions because your brain thinks it's true. So you're going to get emotions that come up with that as well that are unpleasant. The acceptance piece doesn't take away those emotions. After a while, as you start to shift more and more, you do become more indifferent to the thoughts when they come in, and you do get less of those negative emotions. But initially you will have some negative emotions, and so therefore there will be some effort on your part not to perform compulsions, because even though you don't feel terrified anymore, you're still feeling maybe a bit crap, which you don't want to feel because it's still uncomfortable. And humans innately do want to, you know, escape negative emotions and chase positive emotions. But what we learn as we're working through our recovery journey is that we have to accept the negative emotions with the positive emotions, because we can't feel happy and calm all the time. So I think that was 5 key things that I learned on my recovery journey. They were my 5 best lessons that I learned, and the 5 of the most useful things that I learned on my recovery journey. So I hope that they have offered some help for you on your recovery journey. If you've been stuck on something to do with any of these things, I hope that they can be of help to just one person perhaps. But thank you very much for watching, and do take care. Bye.